talk about the project first. All right, so let me, instead of drawing it on the board, I'll try and draw it on here on the surface, right? So it's recorded and everybody has access to it, and it should be on Google Hangouts. So you can always go back and refer to it. Okay. Let's see if this works. All right. So from last week, we saw that we were. I believe I provided to you a template for you to be able to register user, log in, log out, right, and be able to programmatically show certain things depending whether you're logged in or not, right, and whether what particular role you have, right. If you're an administrator, you can register new users, you can change the other some of the users' profiles, right. But if you're not an administrator, you only see a limited set of features, right. So you can get started. Use that template to get started and use that in your own projects. And I know some of you have already started, but you should go back and perhaps put in passport support to make sure that you have authentication, authorization, and whatnot implemented in your projects. Okay. So here we have an end user, and that end user will come in and try to come in to visit your page. One of the first features that there should be some kind of a splash screen or some home screen that is accessible to everybody. It's public, unprotected. Anybody can come and visit the home page without having to log in. Right? Actually, most of your application should be open to everybody. Okay, that only when you absolutely need to know who it is, that is the identity of the person who's using your application, only then should you force them to log in. Okay, so we don't want to go to your page, to your project, and the very first thing that is asking us to log in. Okay, logging in should be optional. Should access most of it. Only when I ask to visit my own profile or try to generate any content, right? Then it would ask me to log in. Okay. Otherwise, I should be able to go everywhere, right? Or obviously, also if I try to access any private information, also it should ask me to log in. So only if I'm generating content or I'm accessing private information. Otherwise, I should be able to go everywhere. From the home page, I might have links for logging in or registering or visiting my profile, right? And we saw how to implement that in last week's lecture, using the mean stack. Right? If another feature that we implemented early on in this in the course is searching, right? Searching either to a local database, right, or preferably to an outside web API that provides you search capabilities, right? So you can do a search, and perhaps it would go to some cloud service through some kind of web API. Okay, preferably some RESTful web API, and it comes back with results, right? A JSON results to a search results page, right? In the search result page, you might have other filters that you can search again, right? And it can go back to the cloud for more data. And here you would have summary of the search results, right? Maybe a thumbnail, and maybe a title, something that summarizes your search results. Okay, so this is a summary. So these are summaries. Okay, if you click on any one of these, it would take you to some detail page. Right, in the detail page, you can have maybe more pictures, more information about that thing, whatever it is. You might have if it's a movie, this might be the rating, the year it came out, the directors or the script writer, maybe the actors, plot, whatever, right? If it's a recipe, from Yumly, maybe the ingredients, anything that is related to that object, all the details about that object. Okay. Again, clicking on this, perhaps you would have to go back to the Web API for more data, for more results, for more details about that particular object, right? And then it comes back with another JSON object that has more data about that object. It might be that you don't have to go back. It depends. Depends on the Web API. Okay. Notice that at this point I have not had to log in. Right. I didn't have to log in. I can use this without logging in. If I try to either bookmark or like or somehow remember anything about that object, right, then I would need to know who you are, right? Because I need to create some relationship between the person who's doing the action, right, and the thing that I am displaying, right? So at that point, if I'm not logged in, then I should be kicked off to some login page for me, to know who you are, right? And perhaps I would come back to where I was, so I can actually actually no. If I like it, right? If I bookmark it or do anything, perhaps I do the action, right? And then I get kicked off perhaps to a profile page. So in the profile page, I might have information about myself, right? I might have information about everything that I have, everything that is related to me, right? Obviously, personal information might be here, but also anything that I'm related to. If I'm related to one of these objects, right? If I bookmarked it or I linked it or I liked it, right? Then I should have a list of all things that I like, right? So it should be listed here. Yes, all the things that I liked. I should be able to unlike, like delete, right? All this information would have to be stored in a local database, right? The database, right? When I like something or entries in my local database, I have to remember this user likes that thing, right? Or this user bookmarked that thing, whatever it is. Presumably, we can. Some of you are working on, whatever that is. Maybe it's a recipe. Maybe it's a favorite sports team. Maybe it's a whatever it is, right? People might generate reviews by users in the local community, right? In your local social network community. Right? These are not reviews from the Web API that you might retrieve, which you might also get, right? If you're using Amazon or Best Buy, sometimes these APIs also provide reviews from the remote site, right? I'm talking about reviews in your local site, okay? In the community that is using your Web API, your web application, okay? You might want to combine them somehow. I don't know. Maybe a tab saying these are remote reviews from the remote site, and these are local reviews from this API. I don't know if you want to do both. I don't know how you're going to reconcile them. Anyway, if I click on a particular user, all right, that commented or reviewed that product or generated any content associated to that product, right? I should be able to navigate to their profile, right? So these would be several profiles, right? Each user has their own profile. Right? If I click on a user, I can navigate to their profile. And in their profile, they'll have their own things that they like, right? The things that they have bookmarked, the things that they have are listing that are related to them, right? And if I click on any one of these things that I have bookmarked, it should take me back to the details page, right? So I have, if I bookmark it was so that I can, if I click on it, I should be able to go back to that thing, no? Make sense? Right? If I click on things that they have liked, I would see the things that they liked, right? Make sense? If I see that a person seems to have found really cool stuff that I haven't found, right? Maybe I want to like that person, right? So I can create a relationship between me not only me and things, but I can make a relationship between me and other people, right, and other users, right? So in your profile, you should have listed everything that is associated to me, right? The things that I bookmarked, the people that I have bookmarked, right? Any reviews that I have made, anything that is related to me, right? So that if I've bookmarked a person, if I click on that, I go back and navigate to their profile, right? So somewhat of a social networking site. So let's see how many pages we have so far. Let's see, we have a home page. We have a home page, maybe a search page, a results page, maybe a details page, and a profile page. That's not too hard, right? It's just 4 pages. Some of these pages could be combined, right? Some of you might want to combine the home page and the results page and the search page, maybe, I don't know. Maybe you want to have it separately. Some of you might want to combine the login page so that it's part of the home page, perhaps, right? Maybe you want to put it at the top right-hand side where you can log in. Definitely, you'll need a registration page, right? You'll need a registration page which has lots of fields there, right, where you can register. Right, if you click on registration, it would take you off to the registration page. Or login might be either a separate page or might be embedded in the home page. That's up to you. Profile, you can't navigate. You shouldn't be able to navigate to your profile unless you log in, right? So it's a login. You can't navigate to your profile unless you log in because I don't know who you are. But maybe you could decide whether you can navigate to other people's profiles. Okay, that's up to you, right? Maybe you decide that no, you can't see any profile unless you log in, or you can view anybody's profile even if you don't log in. But I don't know who you are, so I can't show you your profile. So it might be that yes, you navigate to your profile even though I don't know who you are. All right, but perhaps the information that I show you is only public information. I won't show you any personal information, right? And we saw how to do that in last week, right? To show certain portions of the page depending on knowing who you are, what role do you have, right? What things I know who the currently logged in person is, right? We saw how to do that. All right, so 4 or 5 pages at least, right? Obviously, you're welcome to create many more, or split these pages into several sub pages, right? Maybe the profile page shouldn't have so many sections. It could be several pages that implement several portions. Okay, it depends, right? So these could be broken into smaller pieces, right? So that's the front end. The back end, it's the you wanna implement that local database, right? So that local database should have a representation of the user, right? So here you'll store the first name, last name, username, email, password, whatever, right? And any personal information you'll store in there. And then you're going to have some representation of whatever that thing is, whatever these objects are. Okay, I often refer to them as domain objects. Whatever domain you choose. The domain might be sports, might be movies, songs, whatever. Yes.
When you bookmark any profile, we have to do like any feed or something that whatever activities they do, we should be able to get those notifications. It should be added to our feed of their profile.
Yeah. So every time you create some kind of relationship, right, either with the user, the currently logged in user, and whatever domain object, or between a user and another user, right? You'll need to store some information that records that relationship exists, right? Now it depends what should I store in that relationship, right? And that's what I'm going to talk about now, right? So first of all, let's look at the relationship between a user and a domain object. Now that domain object might be a movie, a recipe, a sports team, whatever you decide that for your particular implementation, whatever domain object you choose to be working on, right? Now, to record the relationship between a particular user and a domain object, usually we use some kind of mapping a table or collection, right? Where it records that perhaps that user likes that domain object, right? Where this might be two foreign keys saying that that user over there, right, likes that object over there. Okay, and that would be a one-to-many on either side, saying that one domain object might be liked by many users, but one user might like many domain objects. Okay, so this one is just an association. I'm sorry, it's a mapping table, right, that records that relationship, right? Other relationships that you might want to capture are those reviews, right? These over here, these reviews, right? Those reviews can also be captured also with some kind of association relationship, saying that again, this user reviewed that object, plus, right, additional fields here about that relationship, right? So this is oftentimes referred to as an association, right? Not just a mapping table, but an association saying, that user reviewed that product, and here are the pieces of data, right? This is the review, the content of the review, the title of the review, when was the review written, yes? Right, so we're describing that association, right? So certain fields, additional fields that describe that association. Make sense? Now, in the domain object, what do we store in the domain object? What fields do we keep here? Okay, well, if you're using mean, typically you'll have already ID, right? For free, you'll leave that. You'll have that. You will also need to store things such as, if I like this. Notice that up to this point, when I'm searching, I'm looking at details, right? None of that is making it to a database. None of that is making it to a database. Only when I, create some relationship about me and that thing, right? Either liking it or reviewing it or whatever, right? Then I want to make an entry into these tables or collections, right? That storing or remembering the fact that this association exists. But I need to know, I need to represent that object. What do I represent in that object? I mean, that object seems to have a lot of things, right? If it's a movie, it might have, thumbnails, it might have directors, actors, it might have plot, right? The year it came out, all sorts of things. What do I store locally? What do I store locally, right? So certainly, if you're in a local database, it might be some kind of primary key that guarantees this to be unique, right? And then additional fields that you might need to just remember. Okay, let's see. Should we store all the information? Right, there's a lot of information here about a movie, right? Should we store that in the local database? I say you should not. Okay, you should store the minimum information, right, so that you can always retrieve that object later on. Okay, so things that you should store, definitely you should store some kind of ID that would allow you to retrieve that object from the web API on demand. Okay, if I ever want to retrieve that movie again, the details, I always would keep. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to remember that ID so I can always retrieve the details, right? The actors and everything else. Okay, so in the IMDb example, I believe it was called IMDb ID or something like that, right? So definitely you need to store that. You need to retrieve that, and that's the absolute minimum you need to keep around, right? And I would say that that's actually sufficient, right? Any information that you need, you have that ID to go and fetch the information whenever you need on demand. But I suggest you also store a couple of other things. Okay, if it's a song or title or some movie or whatever, I would also store some kind of title or name or something, right? So that for instance, over here, right? Over here, when I create all these lists of movies that I have liked, or recipes that I've liked, or songs that I've liked, right? Well, if it's a list, and I only have the ID, I don't even have the title of the movie, right, to retrieve and list the titles of these movies, I would have to go fetch, with the ID, I would have to go back to the API with the ID to retrieve just the title, just to generate that list, right? And if I've liked, 20, 30, 40 movies, right, I would have to do 30, 40 individual requests to the remote API just to extract the title. Yes, right? So I would suggest that you also store, this would be a little redundant, right? Because you're keeping it locally on your database and it's also available remotely, right? So there is a little risk here of inconsistency, right? If they ever update their database, right, and change the title, maybe they want to fix a misspelling or something, right? Now your data is now stale, right? Because you had initially stored the title, right? And you're never ever gonna retrieve that title ever again because you have it locally, right? You retrieved it once, you stored it once, and never again, right? So yeah, so you do run into that risk of inconsistency, but I think it's an okay risk to for now. Okay, perhaps you might want to monthly do a reconciliation, right, of any of these inconsistencies between the two databases, right? Depends how important it is, right? Other things that you might want to store here are maybe the thumb URL for maybe for a small image, right? You might want to store it here as well. If it's a movie, again, maybe the poster, or if it's a CD, maybe the album art or whatever, right? You would store it here so that, again, only for display purposes, when you're displaying it, you might display it as a grid, or you might display it as a list, yes? And you might display the image and then a title, image title, image title, image title, right? And again, I don't want to go out to the remote web API to retrieve any of this, right? I'm going to cache it locally in my database, right? So that I can quickly display it and then go fetch the details. Maybe actually when you go fetch the details, when you're going to display the details, right? Maybe that's a good time to, since you're downloading the details anyway, perhaps that's a good time to synchronize, right? Synchronize and make sure that there's no discrepancy on the title, on the images, anything that you think might have changed or might be stale, right? That might be a good time to update, right, and synchronize the local storage cache that you have, right, and any new updates in the remote API. Make sense, right? What else? Let's see. So another thing. So here, yeah, we were saying about being able to follow or link to other users, right? That want to bookmark other users. So we might have some kind of follows table or collection saying that user is following that other user. Right. So there's a relationship between a user and another user, right? Again, one to many, right? One user might be following many users, and one user might be followed by many other users, right? Also, so here you might want to list, who's following, who are you followed, who's following you, and who are you following are listed here as well, right? So that if I click on any of these users, again, I can navigate to their profile. Okay. Some of you are thinking of creating some kind of messaging system, right? And you want to store all sorts of messages. Perhaps you might want to have another table that says, messages that you can send to other users, right? One user sent these messages to these other users. Now, in mean, if you're using relational databases, this is fine, right? This is a fine relational model, right, where you have these tables have foreign keys to other tables. If you're using the mean stack, this would be one of many choices, one of many ways to implement it, having an intermediate mapping table. But in the mean stack, you have other solutions, right? Instead of having this reified implementation, right? An object could have an array instead, right? It could have an array that's saying, I'm related to these users, right? And this user could have maybe an array over here saying, I'm related to those objects. Right? There's many different options, right, that you can follow when you're talking about a NoSQL database. Right? Not only this relational implementation of foreign keys, primary keys. Okay. Let's see what else. All right, so let's see. That's 4 or 5, maybe 6 pages, depending on how you want to break it up, right? And again, so it would be 4, 5, 6 tables, okay, for a local database, right? And some RESTful API going out to a remote service, right? What else? Let's see. So I call these. I'm gonna put I'm gonna formally record this, right? And I call these relationships between the user and the domain objects, right? And I call these over here relationship between user and user. Okay, so in my description later on, I'm gonna post it. I talk about this, right? I talk about some of the requirements and some of the expectations is that you create a relationship between users and domain objects and users and other users. Okay? All right? What else? Let's see. You might need to create some kind of admin feature, right? To be able to create users, remove users, update users somehow, right? But it's not required, right? So there might be an admin page, right, that lists users, lists all the objects, lists all the relationships, who's following who, right, everything, right? And some meta user, some super user might have access to the admin interface, right, and be able to, right? Now, the admin UI might be very, very useful for you to have a global view into your entire data model, right? And be very, very useful for you to debug, right? And make sure that your application works, right? That yes, I see all these relationships are being created, all these users are being created, and it's very useful for testing. Okay, all right. Does this make sense? All right. Okay. All right. Let me stop this.